All right, so we're live on Facebook and YouTube. Gonna put our intro on. And then we're gonna pull up our guest, new friend, beloved sister by the name of Janice. Be right back. How's it going, everybody? We've got Janice Amoria in the house. I've never met her before, but that's how it works at Soulspeaks. So we're just going to have a spontaneous, intuitive, creative, co-creative collaboration and get to know each other in front of our brothers and sisters. Welcome, everybody on Facebook and YouTube. I just want to remind everybody that Soulspeaks is, and always will be, a free community service. And we also want to extend our gratitude and appreciation for your continued love and support and contributions that allow us to keep doing this every day. In some magical way, it always works out. So let's pull up Janice and get to know her a little bit. Here we go. Let's see. 1 second. Let me fix you. Maybe you've got to unmute. There you
Hi.
Go. All right.
Hey.
Rock and roll. We got
How's
it.
it going?
It's going very good. It's a little, I cramped my schedule a little bit today.
Did you?
So I apologize for being late. We're 10 minutes late, but you know,
It's okay.
Everything in divine timing, right?
My heart's just going pom, 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 pom.
Well, I think that
I don't know why.
Somebody just, well, I don't know. It's so, well, the energy's been really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, June was crazy.
Yeah.
June was not crazy. It was spectacular, but there was a lot of energy in June, and now we're July 1st. Thank you, Mike Diaz, for the comment. Maybe this will explain some of it. He said, is anyone else feeling like electricity is running through your veins since yesterday?
Yes.
These new energies coming in are crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm happy to connect. I love your interviews because it feels like a bunch of family connecting and just bringing our frequencies together. And that's what it felt like today, that was the purpose of today, because I don't have anything to promote or anything like that. I just am so grateful to be part of, to really connect.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I mean, it's, I was just talking, that's why I was late. I was talking to a beloved brother who I just met, like you, and he is wanting to get into, doing this type of thing, podcasting, having a show, talking to people. And, and I was just, we didn't get to talk a whole lot, but I was just telling him, in general, what I found in 4,000 plus video productions is the highest, activations, downloads, transmissions and activations come from having conversations and without agenda, with just two people coming together. And, we can talk about what you do. We can talk about what I do. We can talk about, different modalities and things like that. But it's the experience that we're having and that we share past the point of embarrassment, past the point of vulnerability, and just laying it out there and saying, like, what do you do when you get triggered?
Yeah.
Things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, whenever I get stuck, which isn't too often, but it's always nice to know
Yeah.
sometimes, how did you wake up?
Yeah. So I would say early on as a little girl, I was awake to a certain degree with veils on. Like I came in just going, why am I here? This isn't my real family. And I even used to wish I had like a little pill with an escape in it. Like just in case things get bad, I'm just going to take this pill and I'm out of here, But then I went into, just 3D reality. And when I was in college in the 90s, I graduated high school in 86. So it was probably around 1990 or something like that. I had a roommate who had a mom who was really awakened, and she introduced a book to me that woke me up. And then I just devoured like a mountain of books.
Yeah.
And, we didn't have YouTube back then or anything or internet. But I found a community. I lived in Redmond, Washington, and we did, there's a woman who channeled every week, and we bonded together, and we did that for about 3 years. And then, just kept exploring. I went deep into the Native American traditions with my husband, and explored that for a long time. And then, and then kind of went into hibernation for a little while and just built my family, had my son. And then about 3 years ago, I got a call, a reawakening, just massive. And it's
What was
been,
that? What was that like? There's a lot of people waking up now, especially this year with everything that's going on with the quarantine and all that. People being forced, I guess, into self-introspection, time alone with themselves, spending time with people that they've lived with in the same house but haven't talked to for 20 years. Because everybody was. So it's helpful sometimes to hear how that happened for you. Did you hear a voice? Did you get a visit? How did that go?
Yeah. So the goddess Isis has always been someone. It's almost like if I have any past memories, it's like being a priestess in Egypt. And so Isis would call me, and I would call her, and I would just be like, trying to connect with her. And I ended up joining a goddess circle that was focused on Isis. And in that circle, which was beautiful, on the reading list, there was a book called The Sophia Code.
Yeah.
And I read that, and that just woke me up even more, and really dove deep into that, and really went into and met some incredible close friends that one of the reasons I was very drawn to you and Morgan is because you tell the stories about connecting your higher selves and giving birth to like a third, golden entity. And all of this are things that I experienced spontaneously with connections through the community that we built. And I had a Kundalini awakening and began channeling. Mostly I channel at this point for myself, in writing and just getting guidance. I don't channel in front of other people. But so really that book it was Isis who called me. She's in the Sophia Code, she's one of the initiations. And I have guides that I talk to now, and it's very like the veils have dropped, and I'm seeing things now and getting pretty much constant connection.
Wow. Yeah. And so too, also, so you've done this with in part, you have a partnership through the, you mentioned that y'all dove into the Native American thing, and then you've had a family, I guess kids and all that. So you're doing this with a household with a traditional, stereotypical, I don't want to say to make light of it like 3D, but I mean that's something that I think a lot of people are dealing with is, they're actually walking in both worlds, I guess. How has that been to go through this, especially in the last 3 years, being in a relationship?
Well, my husband is very much awake, very conscious. And so we have a very conscious relationship. And, part of what when Morgan invited me to be on the show, it catalyzed all these things because I was thinking, how do I talk about my story without going too personal? And one of the things that has happened over the last year through some tragedy and through some difficult times is my husband and I are now walking. We kind of broke up with our egos, broke up with each other. Mm-hmm. And we both said, dude, I'm not, both of us equally, I'm not having a relationship with her and I'm not having a relationship with him, but we're going to walk as our higher selves now together. Yeah. And spiritual partners. Yeah. And, where it's different from like your and Morgan's connection is it's less sexy and romantic like it was in the beginning, of course.
Yeah, why do you think ours is sexy? Do you think ours is sexy?
Well, you have a vibe. Yeah, I could, come on. So anyway, I'm drawn to, I was very drawn to your energy because I recognized something there. And that's why I contacted Morgan and did some work with her. But so just one thing I want to share is over this last year, what has come is I zero-pointed the whole idea about twin flames, and I have brought in my divine masculine and feminine within me in divine union within. And so my husband walks by my side, but we're both, very sovereign.
Yeah.
Within us. So it doesn't feel 3D at all, really. Yeah. Our relationship is not 3D. We won't tolerate that, really.
Well, Morgan has a saying she developed or pulled down whatever a few years ago. She used to tell me this quite often.
Yes.
Back when I was still working some stuff out, and she'd say, I'm not willing to have a relationship with my wounded ego. So don't be surprised if I'm not willing to have a relationship with yours.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I'm making a joke about it, but from you just said the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
You guys divorced your ego selves and stepped fully into higher self embodiment in your relationship, which is very cool. And do you have kids?
Yeah, we have a son.
Yeah.
Yes.
How old is your son?
He's 12.
12. So how these kids are amazing. I mean, these kids are like, and I'm talking, my kids are from what, I think 18 to 30, but they were a huge influence on me, especially the two youngest ones, because they were still living with me as I was going through what you started going through, going through in 2017. But, and so without conversation necessarily, just being around their energy. Has your 12-year-old had an influence on your development?
Oh, an influence on my development. Well, he's very strong in who he is, and he's very compassionate, has a lot of empathy. But when he hears his dad and I talk about ascension and all kinds of things, he listens and he'll participate to a certain degree, but he also is like, not my thing. Don't try to bring this into my space until I'll do it the way I want to do it, Yeah. So he's just very himself. He's like a very strong being, and just being a mom, of course, cracked my heart open. So in that regard, of course, he had a huge influence on me as just being a mom and embodying what it feels to love someone that much.
Have you seen in your relationship, like I look at Morgan and I and others as well, you kind of see the dance that's been occurring between the masculine and the feminine collectively. Have you seen like a parallel or any type of connection to your own evolution in your relationship with your husband that follows the collective, where the collective has gone through and gotten to?
Well, it's really, he's kind of on his path and I'm on mine. And so the way I would talk about it is I began really getting into the divine feminine. I love that, I can really be there. But where I'm at right now is just bringing it both. And I just feel the unity of it. And so now when I hear divine feminine, divine masculine, I personally don't get as like excited, or it doesn't really do as much for me as it used to. I just go, no, I'm just like, I'm me, I'm
Right.
it.
Right.
It's, even the name Amoria is more a frequency name. My real name's Janice LaFontaine, and Amoria is like that. It's both.
Right.
And I kind of see it as like this, well, I do see it as like these twin pearlescent dragons that are just one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of more of my personal journey with it. I'm not really interested anymore in divine feminine, divine masculine. I've kind of lost
Yeah.
my attention on it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. And you're a practitioner too, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And so have you seen any type of evolvement or change, especially with what's happened this year in your work? I mean, like,
Yeah.
are there more new people waking up coming into your field? Are the people that you've worked with in the past, are they expanding? Have you noticed anything, any trends, anything like that?
Definitely. Yeah. That's what I've realized my role is. And, there's a lot of people that work with people that are already awake. And my role is I'm a really good catalyst for people waking up. But then again, so is the whole earth right now. I don't need to be like thinking, but when people that come to me are like on the precipice of waking up,
Yeah.
or they're already awake, and then they just want to go deeper with someone who has more experience kind of on that path, or just collaborate. But people are just popping open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
popcorn.
Yeah, like popcorn.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what would you say they're looking for in general when they come to you and they enter your field? Are they
Yeah.
something that's consistent, or there's certain characteristics of what they're looking for when they come in?
Well, so my specialty in the mainstream world is trauma and couples. So they come to me initially for that. And then you as you know, with trauma and couples, you work on all the programs, right? Both scenarios. So in doing that, in starting to work with and bringing in just higher concepts or more conscious concepts like higher self, ego structure, then I'll just keep, kind of using more and more of that active consciousness, more and more of clearing programs, and I'll start using language. I'll speak right to their soul, and their soul will look right back at me. And I'll say, what I'm saying right now may not make a lot of sense to one part of you, but there's another part of you who knows I'm speaking truth right now. And they'll look at me like, yes. So it's like they come to me in these other areas, and then we end up just taking it further. But really, if you think about it, ascension is all about relationships and trauma. You know what I mean? Working on those things and, clearing them out so that you can bring in more of your sacred experience, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Morgan says, when I first met her and brought up the word ascension, because it was new to me, she said that her higher self always called it growing up.
Yeah.
Which always stuck with me, because there's that, that externalization that we're having to get over and past, and taking everything into our own field of self-responsibility and self-reliance and oneness and that type of thing. Triggers are a big deal in this transition we call ascension, especially now this year, because there's so many triggers out there on the global scale, which is a macro of what's happening on the individual level. Do you find people coming to you, especially you say you work with a lot of people that are in relationships? Is that a big topic? How they look at triggers? What do they do when they get triggered? What do you offer as solutions when you get triggered? And again, how do they view the triggers, let's say pre-2020 as opposed to now?
Well, okay, so before, and I think it's probably me too, just I'm more courageous about just going to the deep, with people and talking really honestly about it, instead of kind of playing into the 3D stories that they have, like I can work with someone for a year on the same program, really, in the old energy.
Right.
And I used to do that. Like I almost would play along before, because it was kind of my role as a therapist. But now I just kind of I move right in. Like, okay, your soul says that, how is your higher self feeling about this? Is this a program that you're wanting to continue to do in your life? And I do a type of therapy called EMDR, which really just goes to the heart of it, because with EMDR, you use what's called bilateral stimulus, where you activate the left and right hemisphere of the brain while they're processing trauma. And the way I'm expanding it to support more of this, higher consciousness way of looking at it is, instead of having to look at the traditional way of going to traumatic events in their life, we just go to, when's the last time you were triggered by one of your programs? And let's target that. And then we just go deep with that and clear that in this vehicle. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but this vehicle is an excellent vehicle for that. It's really cool.
What's it called? BM what?
It's called EMDR.
Oh, EM.
It stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Processing. It's reprocessing. It's a mainstream therapeutic.
Oh, it is.
Intervention. Yeah. But it's definitely an ascension tool. It's ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there is, so many different modalities out there, so many different ways. I mean, everybody's got to make their own choices and follow through on where they're led. But now this one in particular, I mean, beyond going back to the last trigger and then digging until you, I guess, find where it was first occurred. What other characteristics does it have?
That this particular, what you do, it's really amazing. So you take whatever the target is. So let's say the target is a fight you had with your partner, and the trigger was, I'm not worthy. Then we ask, okay, well, where do you feel that in your body? And oftentimes, of course, it's in the heart, but it can be all kinds of places, in the gut, in the throat. Where do you feel it in your heart? What's the negative belief? I'm not worthy. How intense is that? And then I have them just go to that situation and just notice what they're feeling. And then we use the bilateral stimulus. And what that does is it brings the left and right hemisphere in balance. It's if you think about it, it's kind of cool. There's with Morgan zero pointing, there's some things I'm seeing in this technique that remind me of that. It's like you have both sides of your brain active. And so you're able to process it from a whole different place and new ideas and concepts. And then my role is to just kind of talk to them. Because, for instance, people with sexual abuse trauma, when they're will often carry blame for themselves. Like, I did something wrong. And it's really hard. It's hard for them to step out of that. And so my role is to help them, like, what if that was your best friend, or what if that was your daughter or your son? So my role is to just kind of walk them through that. But what's so cool is that can be done with all kinds of triggers that are coming up in the ascension process. As we're moving stuff out and stuff's coming up, there's a tool that I can use to help move that through. Yeah.
You said that you have, like many people talk about, at some point, if not, in the present, spirit guides or a team, that type of thing. Yeah. Have you, what does that look like? Are these like past soulmates in previous incarnations? Are these angelic? Are they galactic?
That's really interesting you said that. I've never heard anyone ask it that way, but it just so happens that one of my guides, must have been tapping in intuitively. One of my guides, I feel, is some kind of, is something like that. It's like, it's some kind of deep relationship. And I think it might be my, like, a masculine aspect of myself in another dimension. But it's some kind of very, very potent relationship. And that person, that being is there to guide me. His name's Blue Boris. And he's always Blue Boris. That's his name. Boris. He's blue. And he's got a big smile on his face all the time. And he's mischievous. And anyway, that's one guide. And then I have Isis and Hathor are major guides. And I also really work with Merlin, similar to yourself. Yeah, that one's, because magic is like I love magic. It's just, if I could create magic in my life in every moment, that would be my creation. So I work with Merlin as well.
Yeah.
I would say those are, and Metatron too, that angelic presence.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't say that I've worked with Merlin a lot. I have had experiences with him, and he's even as recent as last night. And in in a few moments, I was by myself. I think Morgan was taking a shower, and I was downstairs. But yeah, and that's always that's always the theme of the communication is magic. It's transformation, alchemic transformation.
Yes.
There's always there. I don't know. That's a powerful consciousness, or whatever we want to call that. Because at least in my experience, it's always been. In fact, I don't have as many. It didn't seem like like I want to say like externalizations or what seems to be external essences don't occur as often, but when it does, a lot of times it is he'll step in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another kind of fun thing about my relationship with my husband is he's an incredible channel, almost
Wow.
to a trance channel, but not totally. And so every Saturday night we get together, and while I don't channel out loud in front of others, I'm still like working through that. He does, and so we come together.
Wow.
And
how long have y'all been together? I'm just curious.
17.
Wow.
17 years.
Powerful.
Yeah. And so he channels every Saturday night. That's kind of what we do. And it's powerful. And, Merlin will come in a lot. And a lot of times my guides will come through for me, but it'll also be for him. And so, we have that, and it's really amped up our everything.
So do you guys get together on Saturday night with other people? Or is it just something you two do together every Saturday night?
Yeah, just us. It's our date night, I guess.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I bet that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's very full body. I mean, he's an incredible, powerful, potent channel. And he will channel for other people, no problem. He's really confident about stuff like that.
Do you channel in front of him?
No, he's actually the last person I would probably channel in front of. It's weird. I've channeled in front of a few other people, but with him, I have a little bit of more stage fright than other people, because he's just like, oh, and he always says, you're going to be doing the same thing. And so I feel like he expects me to be like him in the way, when I channel, it's not so intense. So anyway, I don't know. It's fun. So we don't really have a 3D relationship. Ours is pretty, we still have our stuff come up, but we handle it, Yeah.
Do you ever just get hit with the collective energy, one or both of you at the same time, where it's like it just comes into the field, people talk about solar flares or Schumann resonance goes up?
Yes. Yeah, we'll both have the same. It's interesting. We just went to Mount Shasta recently and had a ceremony there. And there was 2 other very powerful couples there. And my husband and I were hearing this intense, the sound, when you hear the frequencies. And my husband and I were like, oh my God, do you hear that? And both of the other couples weren't really hearing it. And, I know they're very, it's not that we're, so I feel like that was like our experience that we shared, and we'll have similar experiences a lot where we'll, just both be like getting really tired, or we'll both be sneezing a lot and having some congestion, because we know, how it clears through. So we do that together, but.
Let's see here. Somebody was making a comment. EMDR is a phenomenal for such a simplistic tool. That's the Grace of Chaos on YouTube.
Yeah.
How about so your husband channels, you channel. Did you guys know this when you met?
So the way we met, so when I said we got into Native American stuff, it's not quite like that. My husband had sun danced for 14 years. Okay. So it's not like we dabbled. He lived that. He's sun dancing is a Lakota sacred ceremony. He's not Lakota, he's Anishinaabe. But he had been studying with medicine men And, people would offer tobacco to him to help have them, spirits cleared out or healing. So he was very much on that path. And he was doing workshops in Seattle and talking about Humblecha, which is Vision Quest. It's crying for a vision in Lakota. And he was talking about that. And I was very drawn to doing that. That's when I first was meeting him. And so he invited me to observe first, because it's a pretty big thing to do. And then if I felt called to do that, then, great, I'll do that. And so I did. I traveled to where he was putting people up on the hill. And then I did that 4 years. And that's where that's where things started.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I did know he channeled, because he had been channeling. He's 12 years older than me. He has been on this path for a long time, and he had been channeling for a long time. But I didn't know I channeled until, actually, it was really the Sophia Code that helped, I think, and doing the deep work with Sophia Code, and the author of the Sophia Code, Kaya Ra, that really helped me awaken some of my confidence to begin channeling.
Yeah.
And it just kind of took off from there for myself.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard that's a great book. Morgan just picked it up a couple of months ago, and I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and I guess there's some other ones out there too that seem to be popping up in the present, like the Gene Keys, I think is another one. A lot of people talk about that one. But this is interesting. A lot of the couples that or the individuals that are in a relationship that come on to the show haven't been together that long. And so to be together, to me, for more than a few years in this period, especially like since say 2010, 2012, that's a phenomenal achievement. And so if you're able to sustain the relationship and grow as individuals and grow as a couple, there's a lot of, there seems to be a lot of reward, a lot of fruits of your labor. And one of those would be sacred sexuality, or the new type of intimacy. And of course, when I'm talking about sacred sexuality, I'm not just talking about, in fact, it's probably very little of it, the traditional 3D-ish, what we have in our, what we have a conception of in terms of intimacy, physical intimacy. But have you guys seen any type of evolvement that's occurred as you've expanded as a couple, especially these last couple of years, where your intimacy, be it holding hands or other forms of intimacy, has opened up new levels, new dimensions, new energies, new code, that type of thing?
This is kind of this is a topic that is a little complex. So I'm gonna talk about the alchemy of this last year instead of the personal details, because it's complicated.
Right on.
So my husband's name is John, but he's going through a walk-in experience where he goes by Adonis now. So I'm going to call him Adonis, although it's still comfortable for me to call him John. But he and I have a covenant of light, and his role and my role are to assist each other with not being attached. So over the last year, it's been a big, there's been a lot of things that have happened where we've detached from each other. Yes. So we haven't been coming together. I mean, in the beginning, beautiful, beautiful connections, of course. But in this last year, it's been more about not connecting in that way and being very sovereign. So it's been a year. So to say that we explored these things in this last year, the answer is no.
Yeah, don't feel bad.
I have had experiences with other people without being sexual, having like high tantric experiences of coming together and very intimately. And so I feel like, how Robin talks about her role is a transformer, and she talks about your role is a projector, I think. I just took her class. My role is transmutation through communion. Mm-hmm. And so I have learned about high tantra and connecting with others through their higher self. Yeah. And so I have had those experiences that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So my
Harrioscomas.
husband and I haven't been doing that. We have been more in a kind of trying to not be as attached so that we could kind of do what we need to do without getting distracted.
Well, I think that's a big, that's an important part of these new relationships. Morgan talks about it a lot. We've experienced a lot. And that is, because we're talking energy, we're talking about separation, detachment, solitude, your own time, and how important it is to respect that and honor that and revere that, not judge that. And we've gone through it a lot. I mean, we've done it a lot. I mean, there was a period from middle of last year to the middle of wait, I'm getting my years wrong. Yeah, that's right. Uh, anyway, it was a period, maybe most of 2019. After being together for a while, we went through a period of like a reset, almost like the relationship itself went through a celibate period, you know, and the purity was reestablished, right up until last night, and continues like everything else, in this thing. We don't get there. There's not an ED on the end of it. There's always an ING, right? But that's something that seems to be, a couple of points, seems to be, because there's a lot of, you said you zero pointed twin flame, and there's a lot of distortion, misrepresentation, mischaracterization, bastardization in terms of the term twin flame. We don't look at that term. We don't consider ourselves twin flames. But what I'm trying to say is that there is something to be said for where two come together. And one of the things that we've experienced and that she talks about is these times of detachment and separation, as well as the celibacy at the embodiment level, which, I didn't choose to be, well, I chose to be celibate. She chose to be celibate. Had nothing to do with, we're going to meet somebody. It's just something that we needed to do in our own field. And then we came together, and then, we really weren't really intimate for a year or so. And then, we had a divine union ceremony, and then things progressed. But then we hit these moments of this physical herioscamos, this physical new intimacy. And then you kind of have like a lot of activations. You get an activation or a download, and then you have like a integration period. But there seemed to be an important part of that, which was, I guess, in the best way to describe it would be the relationship takes on a celibacy itself that's expanded beyond the individual's own experience of celibacy. It creates a more purified field, I guess. So
Yes.
I think that's something that, because there's a lot of misconceptions about the whole partnership thing. We use the term twin flame, for the sake of the conversation. People think twin flame, okay, I found that person, it's done, it's all over. No, it just begins at that point, right? I mean, there's a whole new universal, dimensional, infinite field being that's been established and that's being expanded through what you and your husband are doing, what we're doing, what many others are doing, and some even on an individual level, I think, too.
Yeah, definitely. And you know how you talk about, I wanted to ask you a few things if you don't mind.
Absolutely. This is a conversation. Okay. You can always ask questions.
Yeah, there's a couple of things one thing I wanted to talk to you about, but first I want to say, what I've discovered over the last year and a half, over connecting very closely with a few people and experimenting, and, I feel like my Kundalini experience happened in doing this. I feel like anytime two people come together, it doesn't have to just be romantic partners. It's like we're coming together now, our frequencies are here for a purpose, to share something, to contribute something, because that's who we are. We're in service. And so in doing that, my intention today was to connect with you and that something come forward that's of service. So
that's right.
We can do that, you and I now, me with my clients in whatever way is appropriate for what needs to happen in that moment. And our higher selves always know what the appropriate way to come together that way. And so we create with people all the time.
That's right.
It's not just with the romantic partners.
That's right.
So that's really the alchemy that's come for me in this last year and a half of all the things I've been through and this experience that I've had. That's one of the gifts that's come forth. And that's why I say, you know, one of my roles is transmutation through communion, because I know how to connect with people that way. And in that connection, when our higher selves are both having the intention to, you know, and when people come to see me, they're putting me in the role to assist, right? So there's an agreement that we're going to come together and something's going to happen on their behalf. And it's both of our higher selves that are doing that. And anytime we come together, light work, because that's what I was excited about talking with you today, because we're two people coming together who are connected in this unity grid of being of service to humanity right now. And that's important and it's powerful. And so, you know, my prayers are, let's capitalize on that. And actually, I didn't mention one of my guides is Star Mother, and that's probably because she's like an aspect of myself, more than a guide, but she's connected to Andromedan energy, and they're constantly, anytime I connect with them, that star family, they're saying, bring our frequency in, bring it in, bring our frequency in. So that's who came in today. And she said, you know, in this connection today, that the two together will bring a frequency potentially, if we both agree to do that whatever is needed come forward in service.
Right on.
So, but the question I had for you was, you talked just the other night about, I can't remember who you're talking to, and it might have been during the day, but I listened to it at night. And you were talking about how you had asked Franco Di Nicola several times about the human entity.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I wanted to just have a little conversation about this, because so many times when I'm working with people, I talk about the ego structure, and I really like Franco's way of looking at it. Like the ego structure is not our human aspect. It's this faulty, it's the programming, it's the fear, it's the old inverted matrix. But a lot of people will refer to it as the human, the bad human, the human, the human, the human. And so I like your conversation about that. And I kind of wanted to explore where you're coming to with your inner landscape of thinking about that.
Yeah. And I still don't, I'm still not totally, totally, in my own mind, totally understand it. But I think after the last show, because it was probably the fifth time I've asked him, and the question I asked him, because he talks about the human aspect and then the soul aspect, and that the soul has a lineage and that the human has a lineage, you know, which I know it's difficult for the human to totally comprehend it from the human aspect alone. And that would be like, for instance, okay, so we create these vessels, we to house the soul so the soul can experience it. But how can there be a human lineage if, you know what I mean? Does that mean Todd, the human, was in all the incarnations? Because there's definitely and I don't know how many lives, you know, I could point to, but there's definitely something that is consistent and present in all the memories that I've had from Earth incarnations. So I've, you know, part of the reason that I have probed him on this, and I'll probably have to ask him again now that you.
Let's keep talking. I want to figure this out.
So one of the things that that I don't know, what do you call that? You know, that knowing you come into, you know, a lot of times over the years past, you know, before this show took the bulk of the programming, which is great. I did a lot of spirit walks and just solo shows, and I would just, you know, it was my own form of channeling or being a conduit or whatever. And so one of the things that would come out of my mouth, you know, would be that I felt or knew or whatever, that we were taking the human hybrid soul species into a higher dimension, into a consciousness that would run in perpetuity. So in other words, Todd the human, Janice the human hybrid, you know, that consciousness will live in perpetuity, birthed in perpetuity, on the same level as an archangel, as an angel, as a galactic, as a light being, as an elemental, as a nature being, whatever the case is. And so it just intrigued me and made me really curious when he would differentiate between the two.
Mm-hmm.
The soul being something that had many incarnations, to include the earthly incarnations, that all those memories are accessible. And then the human part of it started with the formation of the earth and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So but I guess for me, I get a little bit lost in, not lost, but I don't resonate with the spirit scientific explanations sometimes. I love Franco's explanations because I find them, they're good for me. But what I was getting at is like with the, like, I, one time it came out of my mouth, or several times, that, hey, at some point later on in an earthly incarnation or on another planetary or off universe incarnation, I might find myself in a certain experience where we've created, all of us, another great opportunity that might be more duality or more polarity or whatever the case is. And so, like the human effort, I might find myself, or somebody might find themselves in that space saying, oh my God, help me, and reaching out as we all have. And then the door opens. There's a part of me that really believes that Todd Medina, the consciousness, or Janice, the consciousness, will be available based on what they've created from that space in the present moment. So, another way to put that would be, we've got all these aspects. You've got the star mother and so on and so on and so on. And it looks like she's way up here and Janice is down
Yeah.
here at the boots on the ground level, when in
Yeah.
fact they're one and the same. And I think that
Yeah.
is a full circle for me, because I feel like what we've done here is created by, divine orchestration, design, and so on, this opportunity. And you can call it a game, you can call it a school, you can call it a playground, whatever you want to call it. But the purpose being to expand the universal and serve the collective by expanding the universal by the experience. And I think what is different now than, let's say, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, is having the opportunity to actually do everything we do in dimension, like what you talk about when you're working with somebody up there in a tantric type of frequency. But we're actually able to do things, produce things, manifest things, create things, birth things in the flesh. Gods and goddesses in the flesh. So am I going to teleport? Absolutely. Am I going to
Mm.
reverse the aging process? Absolutely. Can I alchemize, or whatever that word would be, alchemize uh, anything and potentially everything that I come into contact with, in collaboration and co-creation with it, whether it be an animal, whether it be a person, whether it be a virus, whether it be a quarantine, whatever that frequency that's presenting itself. I think this is the gods and goddesses in the flesh, and we're actually given the opportunity to, some people say, ascend without physical death.
Right.
This is to me the greatest show in the multiverses, and I'm damn glad to be here. So,
Yeah, me too. So, part of what I just, some things I'm exploring with that whole idea is, okay, so we have this soul, or excuse me, the ego construct. I like that because it doesn't feel like that's me. That's just that's my programs, right? And then you've talked about this too. I've been really enjoying your show, so I've been listening, and you've been talking about your body, noticing that your body is going to start needing, some more attention. And so I wonder if that human entity is, how they talk about our bodies as the Ark of the Covenant, right? That this is sacred.
Yeah.
And so the body has consciousness, its own consciousness. It's got its own, ancestral lines. It's got, it's got Earth's memory because it is Earth.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because I haven't talked to Franco, but I wonder if, it doesn't, that's his cosmology, right? I have my own, but, I just wonder if that's part of what the human entity that he refers to is the conscious body. And then, we bring in the consciousness or the soul, and the two together then are a sacred human experience, like an alchemy together.
No, I think that's a great line of conversation, because we talk about, and we've all become very familiar with, the idea and the reality of multidimensionality. So whether it be through a relationship with my higher aspect as a star mother, or a spirit guide that was a relative in a past life, or whatever the case is, we pull from that. We pull from those aspects, and we gain information. We gain code. And we gain guidance and direction and revelation and epiphany. Uh, you know, uh, there's another part to it, and so I'd have to bring in Morgan and Franco to kind of explain it. So
Yeah.
when I started Soulology in the physical, long before I knew that it was actually conceived 60 years ago in the etherical with Morgan and a monad, I came out doing my thing, and the first thing I got was I am soul. So there is one, there is a perfect order, and number three, each soul is unique in and of itself. Um, and so that's kind of how I came out of the block. So it was, it's like, I am not human. I am not only human. I am soul. So all the rants and all the spirit walks I would do, I am soul. I am soul. Then I met Morgan Lee, and started to be introduced to all the multifaceted aspects of the human itself. So this would be the traumas that you deal with your clients, and the different labels and the different roles, and and all that stuff, and you go through that path. Then Franco walks in the door, and Franco walks in the door, and this is a person, if anyone doesn't know, that's been connected from in utero, with memories in utero, and many other multidimensional, off-planet, off-universe memories of incarnations on other planets and such. So he came in and he said the human aspect. And I'm like, okay, the human aspect. Franco, what's the difference between the human aspect and the soul aspect?
Right.
I even asked him one time, is the human aspect a soul? He said, almost. I got to go back and ask him that one again as we progress. But here's the point. So as he started to, so I understood there was a multifaceted human part of me, the 1-year-old, as Morgan would tell me, the 1-year-old, the 2-year-old. Invocate the 1-year-old, invocate the 2-year-old. And so all these different faces of Todd were not separate from me. And I got to the point where I realized through her, because then I changed the verbiage on my writings and on my rants, which would be, you cannot find your soul until you find your human. Okay. This was my own personal revelation. And I think there's a lot of merit to it. That's just, just how I feel. But so when then Franco walks in the door, now he starts talking about the human aspect, but the human aspect outside of the labels and the roles and the traumas and all the things we picked up in the conditioning and the programming, he starts talking about let's just say the layers. And one of those layers is the body. Now, each one of those layers has its own consciousness. So now I come full circle. And I'm married to a woman who I asked for 2 years, what the hell do you mean by you have to embody it? And it was just like with the questions with Franco. I would ask Franco and he'd tell me, then I'd ask him 3 shows later, can you tell me this again? And then I finally got it. Embodying means boots on the ground per Todd's, philosophy, but boots on the ground, you got to apply this. So now you come full circle. And she said this, she said this on a program right before we left Florida about 6 weeks ago. And I just happened to, because I never go watch the shows again, I just happened to be directed to watch this show. And in the show, she said, she was explaining from her own journey that in terms of alignment, in terms of understanding, or however you want to put it, my soul is at 51% or more. This is her talking. My mind is at 51% more in alignment. My body's not. And so with a combination of that and Franco's explanation of the consciousness and the Morgan's explanation of the trinity of the mind, body, soul, she made that comment that my body's not at 51%. Well, on the surface, that sounds like, what do I eat? What do I drink? What do I smoke? What do I exercise or don't, or all that stuff? But it's deeper than that. It's all of that. And as a lot of people have talked about this year, the body has been louder and louder and louder, And so for me, I feel like that the body is the same God substance as the etheric body, you know, as the star mother part of me, as the, you know, whatever, you know, all of the Merlin part of me, all of it. The body is made of the same substance, and the experiment or the experience is somehow partly founded on the physical matter and the physical reality of that.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity, and we're doing it. Carbon-based
We're
light
doing
body.
it. Yeah.
We're, you know, so this is exciting to me. I mean,
It is.
it
It's
gives me
really
chills.
exciting. Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so it affects everything from, you know, your body's saying, hey, you can't eat that anymore. Hey, you need to stop that. And
Yeah.
then you go back to the ego, which I'm still not in my own field 100% on that, in
Yeah.
terms of like, do I understand it? Now I get what Franco says, that it's part of the inverted matrix. It was implanted in us to you know, to collaborate with the
Inverted
inverted matrix.
matrix.
But I also see it as being part of me, and I value it. And I used to say in the early days of Soulgy, it's the flip side of the soul. Not knowing what I'm saying, like, and as a channeler, you know, a lot of times you'll say something and figure it out later. But I think when it comes to the resistance to what my body is telling me, and I think that's certainly my old ego pattern. That's not wanting to
Yeah.
let go of a
Yeah.
habit or let go of a certain identification I might have with something that I do or don't do. Yeah, so
And that's where, you know, that's where I kind of differ from you a bit, because I see that's what I'm not wanting to do. I'm not wanting to think of the soul, or excuse me, the ego programs as me. So for me, that's different. I don't identify with it. For me, it's like, you know, with Morgan's tool of zero pointing all of it, that to me is like a consciousness of the programs. It's just a program consciousness for me.
Well,
that's my world.
And I don't think, and not that it matters, because I think that's all part of what we do is to be open. But she put up a comment a minute ago in regard to this, what you're talking about. Let's see where it goes. I didn't read it all.
Yeah.
So the ego is the voice of the human, the translator, the projector, the wounded ego. There's a difference. There's a differentiation there. So the ego, wounded ego. So the wounded ego takes over this healthy aspect via dualistic programs and unconscious wounds. So that's a good point. And there is a differentiation between an ego and a wounded ego, I guess. Now I can remember when I went on the streets, when I woke up, like a lot of people, my whole world turned upside down, successive traumas. And I chose to go on the street because that's the only place I could be safe, just to be in that constant communion and stay in my space and start dealing with shadow or dealing with trauma, whatever. Now, if I look back at that and I look at her statement here, when I was on the street, I can tell you that I am soul, you know, like I knew that part of it. I knew that, like I knew nothing else. I would go to my purported death. I am soul. But all those steps I took for 2 years, walking miles and miles every day, I can promise you that the best part of my ego was a big factor in me being able to take those steps in faith, because I don't know how to explain it, but healthy ego, like I wasn't going to quit, you know, and I know that was soul, but there was a, and maybe it wasn't wounded ego. Like, oh, I'm going to show them. It wasn't like that. It was just
no,
like,
it's like the human heart. That's where I wonder. That's what I wonder if that's what Franco's talking about, the human entity. That
could be,
but I don't know. It's all really words, right? But it's fun to talk about, because this is what I do in teaching and talking, not teaching, but guiding or helping or collaborating with clients. I don't like thinking of myself as a teacher per se, but we collaborate. And I love this stuff because it helps to work through, you know, like differentiating. You talked about triggers. That's really my whole job in a way. That's all my work is about triggers, in the sense, you know.
Well, I think triggers is another way to like say metaphorically compare, like in an analogy, compare ego. So like if I look at trigger 9 years ago, I didn't know what it was. Right, to be honest with you, I was getting triggered all the time. But once I got into it, like with sitting with Morgan and learning and such, I still didn't like them. Right. I mean, I don't like a trigger. Oh yeah, I don't get triggered, but now it's turned. Now it's like, oh,
Opportunity.
thank you for, for that. Now that allows me, now I have some foresight. Now I have some experience. So the ego, I kind of look at the same way, I guess, in the context of this conversation, and in that I have a real appreciation for it. Now you said something that really jumped out at me, and there are no coincidences. And here we go with the two coming together for the highest and best good for the experience that we have. But I remember in those 2 years, the stuff that I received, and this is how Soulology, at least in the physical, started. It was just from a flip phone. I would just send the stuff up. I didn't have pictures or anything. I just started the group, and there was like 400, 500, 600 people in it. And they were all simple things. Like, they were all very simple little adages, like rule of the road. Don't lie to yourself. Don't make excuses for yourself, and don't blame anything external. Boom. That's it. You don't need to know anything else. One of them was actually shown to me in the third eye. It showed the heart, the human heart, and it showed a line down the middle, and it showed ego on one side, soul on the other. And so as I went into the conversation, the dialogue with the higher self, or whatever you want to call it, it was explained to me like, okay, Todd, for instance, look at crimes. 1/3 of all crimes are crimes of passion. So that would be on the ego side of that line in the heart. And then of course, we know that unconditional love, and that there's another type of love, but I think that's a very important point, because so many people talk about passing everything through the heart. And I think the heart is I don't know, it's almost like the like the unknown quality.
It feels like the human experience, like the divine human experience is the heart, the body, the bliss of just being in communion, or in pure love or light. That feels to me like the human part of the experience. So yeah.
Oh, she put
Thanks for exploring with me.
She puts it. Yeah, well, I love it. It's great. This is how we learn. She just put up another one. The wounded ego is the inverted matrix.
Yes.
So if Franco, because you got to remember Franco's his historical explanation is that we all came together and created an organic 3D. And in that organic 3D, there was polarity and duality. So that, and I've never heard him say
there's the healthy ego that you're talking about.
Yeah, so I would say that, yes, that was there. And then he said, 10,000, 15,000 years ago, a group came up, and this would be post-Atlantis, and said, hey, let's raise the stakes now. Which, if you look at the narrative, might be something like the reptilians came in and created a patriarchal system, and then the whole thing goes like that, and the ego, you have an inverted matrix, and the distortion, the archons in the fourth dimension, and all that stuff. But yeah, I like that. That's a simple way to explain it. And this is why I love doing this, because you never know where it's going to go.
Thank you, Morgan. It's a team effort.
Yeah. And I appreciate you coming in. And
connection.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming in, sharing space with us, and honoring us with your presence. Would love to get you and your husband on here sometime, talk about sacred sexuality and all those crazy things. I'm just kidding. Whatever.
All right, Todd. Bless you both, and thank you for all you do. Bye.
Peace out. All right, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.